In 1998, Alton Towers in England debuted what they claimed to be the world's first vertical drop coaster with Oblivion. The ride was the first iteration of the dive coaster from manufacturer B&M. These rides are categorized by having an elongated train with only a couple of rows and a signature first drop where it holds you, forcing riders to stare down at the ground below. We've since seen these pop up all over the world, including Sheikra at Busch Gardens Tampa, Griffin at Busch Gardens Williamsburg, Baron 1898 at Efteling, Yukon Striker at Canada's Wonderland, that's currently the world's largest dive coaster, but it all started with Oblivion. And this ride is by definition a one-trick pony, because there's quite literally only one element to this ride, the drop. Every dive coaster that's been built since then follows up that drop with an Immelman. Oftentimes they'll send you then into another inversion, maybe even another drop. But Oblivion has the drop and then a turn into the brake run. That's it. Which now doesn't seem like much, but certainly at the time it was pretty cool. We'd never seen anything quite like this. But what truly makes Oblivion unique is the fact that Alton Towers has a height limit. They can't build above the tree line. And Oblivion has a very impressive 180-foot drop. That is done with only a 65-foot height, meaning almost 2/3 of that drop is located underground. This top portion that you see is only a section of it, and that's what's so wild. It makes for an incredible visual spectacle as you're standing on the pathway watching riders literally plunge into the Oblivion. Riders are quite literally flying underneath you, below the ground, shooting up out the other side. I can see how this could be quite terrifying for people who are afraid of roller coasters. Due to its short length, it can feel like quite an underwhelming ride experience. With only 1,222 feet of track, your actual ride time from when you crest over that hill to when you hit the brakes is less than 15 seconds. So think about that next time you spend all that time waiting in line. It is a very unique experience, but by nature, when you hit the brakes, you're kind of like, that's it? Really? It feels like there should be more. And on any other dive coaster, there is. So from a review perspective, how do you judge this experience when this roller coaster is literally one moment? It is one element that is done very well, but is also a roller coaster that I never want to wait in line for. You ride it once and then you head off to do something else, because at this point in time, there are much better rides at Alton Towers than Oblivion. But certainly at the time this was built, this was like the latest and greatest thing. Alton Towers pretty much had this, Nemesis, the Mine Train, and then their old Corkscrew. That was really it. So yeah, of course people couldn't wait to experience this ride. But every time I've come to Alton Towers, Oblivion is the ride that I feel obligated to experience while I'm there, but it's not one I would wait long for, probably only if it's like 15 minutes or less. Now, I will admit that part of this criticism definitely comes from the perspective of someone who had experienced many other dive coasters prior to Oblivion. If I rode this one at open, or maybe this was my first dive coaster, then I think it'd be a different story. But I had experienced rides like Sheikra and Griffin and several of the other dive coasters throughout Europe, and so this was immediately sent straight to the bottom of my favorite dive coasters list. If you've heard me talk about some of those other dive coasters, one of my complaints with even the ones with more of a layout than this one is that they're still too short. They still feel like one-trick ponies. So now here we have Oblivion, which is even less. So I think by now you can probably tell that I'm not a huge fan of this attraction. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't do anything well. I quite enjoyed the soundtrack. It's got a very cool pre-show. I love the Q video. The presentation on the pathway is fantastic. And I was also quite impressed with the operations. This thing can run 5 trains. 2 vehicles dispatching at a time. One starts up the lift hill, the other parks at the bottom. As soon as one crests over, the next one starts up the lift. And since it only has one element, I'd hope that that one element is pretty good, and luckily for Oblivion, it is. This drop sends you down at an 87.5 degree angle, so even though they are marketing it as a true vertical drop, it technically is not. I think one thing that could make it even better is if there was more mist at the bottom, so you can't see anything below ground, because in its current state, as soon as you start to crest over, you can see the bottom of the first drop through that tunnel. At least that's how it was when I went. I think it'd be better if you literally couldn't see anything, so it looks like you're just plunging into the mist and who knows what comes next. One thing I would have liked to have seen more was a longer hold. This being the first dive coaster, they definitely got better with this part. Oblivion just hangs you there for like half a second. It is very quick. I like how the newer dive coasters will keep you up there for like 5 seconds at a time. It's more time for the terror to set in. So after all this is said and done, does Oblivion have the best drop on a dive coaster? I don't think it is my favorite. However, objectively, I think it is probably the coolest. The fact that over half of it is underground by far makes it the most unique. But I still think I opt for the dive coasters with the bigger first drops, ones that hold you up there for longer, where also you visually can see your feet dangling. Oblivion is one of the only dive coasters that does not have that floorless seating setup. and I absolutely think that the floorless aspect adds to the experience. But considering what Alton Towers had to work with, I still think this ride is pretty cool, even though it's personally not a ride that I really ever seek to experience. So for its final score, I'm giving it a 4 out of 10. It's not rough or uncomfortable, like there's nothing inherently negative about it other than the length. Rides that I would give a lower score to are the ones that I would consider actually like unpleasant experiences. But I would consider Oblivion absolutely below average. I'd pretty much rather do just about any other ride here. But I can at least acknowledge it for how cool it was at the time it was built. If it wasn't for Oblivion, I don't know if we'd have as many dive coasters out there as we do now. Someone had to make the first step, and I applaud Alton Towers for taking the leap. So let me know down in the comments below what you think of Oblivion, if you agree with the points that I brought up. And of course, stay tuned for more coaster reviews here at Coaster Studios, and I'll see you next time.